When I was in high school, I had this track coach that would just pound into our heads, never back off, never slow down until you completely run through the tape. He would just hit us and remind us, never stop pushing, never stop driving, never stop putting everything you have into the race until the tape is behind you, broken and behind you. Many times, young athletes would approach the finish line of any race, and as they saw the line approaching, they would let up just a little bit. They would pull back just a little bit because they would think they're done. And in that little bit, they sometimes would lose the race or miss a personal best or miss the time to qualify for the next heat. You see, the key was never to stop, never to back off. Keep pressing until the finish was firmly established. This becomes pretty important when we talk about our walk with God. One of the best books in the Bible, one of my personal favorites, is the book of Esther. As a brief overview, this book is set during the reign of King Xerxes, the king that we all know. We've heard that name, King Xerxes, and this happened during his reign, roughly 486 to 465 BC. And King Xerxes was throwing this multi-day celebration for his people, his subjects, a lot of wine, a lot of great food. And during this celebration, he ordered his queen Vashti, to appear before the people to show off her beauty, to show off what a stunning beauty that she was. And she said no, which was just absolutely unheard of. And so this began a series of events where he ultimately banished her. She was no longer the queen, and a search began for a new queen, a new wife. And this is where a beautiful young Jewish girl named Esther comes in, and she ultimately wins the day and becomes the new queen. It's a long story, but just to save time, Esther, the beautiful Jewish girl, becomes queen. Xerxes' second in command is a man by the name of Haman. And Haman has this big issue indirectly with Queen Esther, because Queen Esther's cousin and guardian is this man named Mordecai, and Mordecai will not show Haman the respect that he believes that he deserves. But somewhere along the way, Mordecai is very instrumental in foiling an assassination plot on King Xerxes. And so Haman, who's deeply offended by Mordecai's actions, is starting to hatch this plan, this very evil plan, because he hates Mordecai, he hates the Jews, and he wants to make them pay. The plan gets very severe, and Haman actually is ultimately laying the groundwork for Mordecai to be killed, and then ultimately all the Jewish people. Well, at the same time this is going on, King Xerxes is trying to figure out a way to honor Mordecai from saving him from the assassination attempt, from the plot. And so Haman's planning to destroy Mordecai, but King Xerxes is planning to ultimately celebrate him. And so during the celebration of Mordecai, Haman is offended now at a whole new level, and this breeds his hatred to even grow deeper. So through a series of manipulations by Haman, where Haman convinces the king that a very dangerous and rebellious people live among his subjects, King Xerxes ultimately agrees to allow the Jewish people in his kingdom to be destroyed. And now this is where the race begins, the race as we were discussing before. Beautiful Queen Esther now has to step in. Mordecai and Queen Esther have this famous moment where Mordecai is begging Esther to intervene and save the Jewish people. She explains to Mordecai at this time that for her to intervene, for her to ask King Xerxes to intervene, would mean that she would have to approach him unsummoned. And to approach the king unsummoned could mean her death. Mordecai explains to her, salvation for the Jewish people will come. God will save his people. And don't think that you alone, if you do nothing here, that you alone will be spared, because God will save his people. And if this plan comes to fruition, the Jewish people will be ruined. And Mordecai further goes on to say, and who's to say that you weren't placed here for a time such as this? Queen Esther has just been told, you're in this race whether you like it or not. So Queen Esther agrees to approach the king unsummoned, even if it means her life. But she does ask, she's smart, and she asks that before she does, that her people will pray and fast. And she also asks that Mordecai ask his people to pray and fast. And she said she would ask her people to pray and fast. For 3 days, they would go without food and water and pray and seek God's direction. The race has begun. They are hard running. Start with the fact that the people physically begin to petition God through their fasting and prayer. They're begging God to intervene. This 3 days by itself wouldn't be easy. And now after that, Queen Esther has to approach King Xerxes unsummoned. And if he does not extend the gold scepter, which was traditional, if he extends the gold scepter, the person that came to him unsummoned would not be killed. But if he does not extend the gold scepter, then her life would be forfeit. I know it's hard to appreciate, because in this day and age, you just can't imagine not being able to just walk into your spouse and talk to them, but that's how it was then. Here's how the Bible, this is Esther 5 verses 1 through 3. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you." So this race that we're running is continuing. Remember, it's all about running through the tape, right? We're about halfway, and spiritually, the queen is racing against the clock and against some pretty skilled competition, because Haman, his plans are committed. So Queen Esther, at this meeting, when he extends the scepter, she says that if she pleases the king, would he do her the honor of coming to a luncheon and bring Haman with him as well? And he agrees. He shows up at the luncheon. He asks her again, "What is it that you want? I'll give you up to half the kingdom." And she goes on to say, she's smart. She's playing her cards right here. She asks only that Haman and the king again honor her by coming to a dinner. And then at that dinner, she'll make her plans clear and she'll make her request. King Xerxes agrees. And Haman's even excited. He's believing that he will be honored. He's believing that maybe this whole thing's about him and he's going to receive an honor. At the dinner, though, the king and Haman join Queen Esther, where she reveals to King Xerxes, that she's a Jew, and it is her people that have been targeted to be destroyed. And this very plot, this evil plot to kill innocent people because they're perceived to be a threat, because this man Haman put the idea that they're a threat in your head, was the author of this plot. King Xerxes is enraged, and he orders the execution of Haman, and that his property and all he owns be given to Queen Esther as her estate. Now, back to the race metaphor, we've turned the corner, right? We're running into the finish line. The evil plot creator Haman has been killed. The king knows what's going on. Everything's done, right? Well, not really. You see, the date for the destruction of the Jews had already been ordered. It had been delivered by king's edict throughout the land, and it's not as simple as making a phone call and calling it off. When the horsemen ride out with the king's edict, the plans are already in motion. It's not something that just stops because Haman is identified and killed. And this is what I meant when I said run through the tape. You see, Queen Esther, she knew that it wasn't over. She knew that the plan was still in place, and she knew that even though she had been vindicated, Haman's plan had been revealed, and the king had stood beside her and behind her, she also knew that the date of the Jews' destruction was still ahead of her. And so what did she have to do? She had to again approach the king unsummoned and beg him to end this evil scheme. This is revealed in Esther chapter 8, verse 3 and 4. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king again extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she rose and stood before him. So this is ultimately where King Xerxes finally puts an end to Haman's plan. Haman's sons are killed, his entire family is wiped out, and his family's removed from the face of the earth. The king orders that the Jews may organize and defend themselves against any seeking to do them harm, and they may take revenge on those that have plotted to destroy them. So now the Jews can protect themselves under the king's order. The Jews survive. They actually not only survive, they eliminate a lot of their enemies. They take their wealth. And Mordecai ultimately and Queen Esther go down in history as, at that time at least, the saviors of Israel, even though we know God saved Israel. See, many times through failure and also through a victory that's kind of perceived, we take our foot off the gas. We back off the race. But God tells us to be persistent in prayer. I know a lot of people that are listening to this, you're praying for stuff, you're asking for stuff, and there's things that are critical in your life. Pray. Be persistent. And when you have the little victories, thank God for them, but then pray more. Don't quit. Don't take your foot off the gas. Never look back until you run through the tape. God tells us to be persistent in prayer. Sometimes it's going to look like the race is won, and sometimes it'll look like the race is completely lost. And in both cases, Until the tape is broken, we don't know the outcome, so keep running. If Queen Esther had been satisfied with the exposure of Haman, the revealing of his plan, and simply trusted that it was done and all things would work out, we'd probably have a very different ending to the story. But she never took her eye off the tape. She knew the plan was still hatched and still coming, and she risked her life a second time and approached the king again. When you're winning, pray. When you're losing, pray. Queen Esther used her position, wise counsel for Mordecai. She trusted God deeply. She fasted, she prayed, and she kept her eyes on the goal. Run through the tape. Finish the race. If things are good for you, pray. If things look hopeless, pray. Never quit until you see Jesus. And he tells you, well done, my good and faithful servant. And he's welcoming you into his kingdom. God loves us. Run through the tape. Keep praying. Whatever your goals are, whatever your desires are, whatever your heart is telling you you need, just keep praying. Sometimes we just have to learn to persist. Keep our eyes on the goal, and he will deliver. Until